And I will never forget, we pulled the fridge like off of the wall, and the entire wall just like started moving. And the whole wall was moving because she left roaches in the house. So like literally the entire house was like filled with roaches and stuff. And I never forget that smell. Like that was that was terrible. Oh shoot! Oh man! I believe the kids are the future. I forgot the rest of that song already.
Let's do it.
Say no to drugs.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up, man? I'm Kelly Darden. I go by KD as well, and I'm the CEO and owner of Trilogy Investments Company.
Dope.
A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Eastern North Carolina, from Greenville, a little small town. Graduated from J.H. Rose there, went to NC State. Graduated NC State in 2015, and I've been working in corporate for a little while, but something just always told me that I wanted to do more than just punch a 9 to 5 like a clock all the time. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how Trilogy came along. Realized that I didn't want to, have to work for somebody for another 30, 40, 50 years just to not enjoy retirement, wife and kids. I want to travel, just have fun and live on my own terms, So that entrepreneurial bug, kind of started as soon as I got out of school. I am the CEO and owner of Trilogy Investments Company, so focus in real estate, primarily buy and hold, so long-term rental properties, 30, 40 years that I'm going to be able to pass along to my kids one day. I have 3 goals in mind with Trilogy. The first is to provide housing for affordable housing for Black and brown families. Second, to promote entrepreneurship, especially through real estate. And third, probably most important, is to have generational wealth in the family.
That's really cool.
When it comes to the how or the why around the affordable housing piece, right? Gentrification, right? It happens everywhere. You know what I mean? You see a Starbucks pop up. You see, hate to say it, but a little white lady walking her dog through a neighborhood that used to be the hood 5, 10 years ago. A lot of times people that look like us get kicked out of our communities, and we don't have any say or ownership in the community. So it's like when your landlord jacks up the rent and says, hey, we're pretty much forcing you out or you can't afford it, then you pretty much don't have a say in the conversation. So for me, with the investing side, I look at what the rental rates are like in an area, but also just kind of keeping in mind there are going to be some people who eventually want to buy the crib that they live in, right? That's something that long term I'd love to be able to set up for people. I think it's cool to have a family live in a house for 5, 10, 15 years. The good thing about a house versus an apartment, for example, you kind of spread your roots, right? Like if you have a kid, you want your kid to be in a stable, consistent home. You know what I mean? So eventually I'd love to maybe even sell that property like to a tenant, that's been there for 5, 10, 15 years. So being able to control the tenants that come into an area and give them that opportunity, because a lot of times people may get turned down because of their criminal background, or maybe they don't have a stable job income. Everybody deserves to have an opportunity to have 4 walls, right, in a place that they call home. So it's a necessity, but I'd want to make sure that the people that look like me aren't going to be kicked out, in 5, 10 years, especially in that Eastern North Carolina area. This year will be 3 years for me that I created Trilogy, and at this point, I'm pretty much doing like 1 property a year at least. So right now, I have my primary home in Raleigh, and then I've got 2 investment properties in Greenville, and I say that I have 3 properties in total because eventually the house that I'm living in now is going to be part of that portfolio. So, people always say like, where can I get started? How do I jump into it? Oh, it costs too much to, afford a place and everything. What I'm doing is pretty much what some investors call house hacking. So you can get an FHA loan and make a place your primary residence, and your down payment's 3.5%, right? So depending on the area that you're looking at, it might not be too much of a huge down payment, but you live in it for a year, and then at that point you can move out. You can have renters come in, or you can get a duplex or a triplex, or a place that's got multiple houses like within a building, and you can rent out the other two doors, or the other room. You can even have somebody live in your house really and help pay down your mortgage. And then at that point, when you move out, they can still stay and they can end up paying the whole thing for you. So yeah, like I said, I have 3 investment properties, and the good thing about Eastern North Carolina is that your money goes a whole lot further in the country, right? So one of the properties, the place that I renovated last summer, I bought the place for $15,000. So I know guys right now who probably paid $40,000 at least for like a car. They have no business being in right now. But the mortgage on that place is $143 a month, and the rent is $650. So I think rough numbers, I think I'm doing like a 30% return like on my money on it. So I mean, real estate is not as hard as people think it may be. It's just about knowing where to look in and what are the steps that are going to go into getting a property. So because those properties are so cheap, back home, I save up, get the cash flow from a place and use the money from the rent, and save up from my job, and combine those two. And then, just eventually they'll start buying themselves, where, one property's rent will just go into the next, and then so on and so forth, and build from there. The way I got started with entrepreneurship is this year actually makes 5 years for me in corporate America, right? And I work in a good tech company. I love the people, I love the job, but I hate the idea of just punching a clock for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And you get to your 60s and 70s, it's like your kids are grown up, you didn't get a chance to travel, you didn't get a chance to just really enjoy life, So I told myself that I wanted to retire at a young age. I didn't know how I was gonna do it, but my goal was to retire by age 50. That was like the ultimate goal. And so that was the first step, was telling myself like, all right, I don't want to work for the rest of my life. Or at least I don't want to work for somebody else. So I started reading books all the time. Like, my library is like my sanctuary in my house. I always try to keep some type of literature going on, week in, week out. And one of the first books I think that really made a big impact for me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That book didn't tell me, that I'm gonna do, real estate going forward, but it just said like, put you in the mindset of buying assets versus liabilities, right? And so from there, I told myself I wanted to buy a house in Raleigh because I was gonna live here for a couple years. It didn't make sense to me to pay rent to somebody when I could just own something for myself and at least get some equity off of it for a couple of years and then eventually rent it out. The problem is there were people that were outbidding me like left and right. So it took me maybe 3 years to actually end up buying the place that I'm in now. But I had been saving up over those 3 years eventually to get the property here. But before I got to that point, because I had been saving up so much, it turned into one of those like, man, I just got all this, money sitting on the side. Like, what can I really do with it? And, my pops, he does investment real estate too. It's always been around. And so having that conversation with him, my aunt, she's my property manager now, it turned into, well, have you thought about doing investment real estate? And I was like, no, but I'll give it a try. And, from there, I ended up looking in the Greenville area. And ironically enough, I found the house that I'm in now and my first investment property within a month of each other. So I closed on them a month apart from each other. So I became a businessman and a homeowner within, 30 days time. So, and the rest is just history from there. The hardest thing about having tenants, or I guess the most like nerve-wracking thing, is like, are they gonna tear my place up? I put all this money into it. Are they gonna pay the rent on time? Those are things that you you try to screen ahead of time, but ultimately, like, it's still a roll of the dice every time. Like, you don't know what you're gonna get. Typically, you want to have, and of course, you can't discriminate on tenants and stuff, but if you could, you'd like to have an older family, somebody that's on a fixed income, so they're gonna treat it like it's their own home. They're not gonna tear it up. Young people, I love us, right? But I've had house parties before. I used to have roommates I had house parties with and everything, so I know how reckless people can get with the house. But you try to screen ahead of time, and make sure that somebody's got stable income, good background and everything. No real bad criminal history, anything like that. So you try to make sure that you can mitigate that on the front end. But the first property that I got is at 303 Cadillac Street. The property was listed for $32,000, and so I had a tenant who was actually already living in the house when I bought it. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. I don't have to lift a nail. I don't have to paint, do anything. I've already got somebody in there that's paying rent. So this is perfect. And the first month that I had the woman living there, my aunt, who's my property manager, she reached out to the woman. It's just like, hey, we noticed, haven't gotten rent. And her response was, well, y'all will get it when you get it. And so that was like, oh, this ain't gonna work. We got to figure out something here to, something's got to shake. So went through the court process and had to get her evicted. And so it's just like, okay, crap. I thought I had a tenant in there. Now I got to do renovations. Like, what am I going to do? Luckily, North Carolina is a real landlord friendly state. So you've got some states like California where they're more tenant friendly. So you have some cases where people are living in a house for like a year, 2 years, and they're not paying rent. They're just squatting in the house. But when I went in after the woman was evicted, she had kids and they had put holes all through the house. She left food all in the fridge, and I would never forget, we pulled the fridge like off of the wall and the entire wall just like started moving. And the whole wall was moving because she left roaches in the house. So like literally the entire house was like filled with roaches and stuff. And I never forget that smell. Like that was that was terrible. But I cleaned out the house. Luckily the damages weren't too bad. I did get a home warranty, so a lot of the things that I would have had to repair, weren't as big an expense out of pocket. But had an exterminator come through. He had to come 6 different times to clean out the house, because cockroaches are just, yeah, I don't wish that on anybody. But I think it took maybe 3 months after I evicted her to get everything, renovated, painted, new flooring in the kitchen and the bathroom, new appliances, obviously, because I could not use that fridge anymore. And then I got a new tenant in there. And the good thing was that she was paying $500. I was able to raise the rent to $650, after it had been cleaned and updated. So that's the good thing. You can always raise your cash flow between tenants and turning over a house. So it's not as bad, but everybody's going to have a horror story. There is no perfect scenario. You just try to mitigate stuff as much as you can. For anybody that's wondering, how do I get started, or like what's the first thing that I need to do, honestly, just start asking the question. Really, like, reach out, hit me up. Over the past 2 years, I've had a lot of friends. Like, I'll post on my story on Instagram and just social media. Like, I'll post before and afters or videos or conversations with contractors and everything. So reach out to people that check out a podcast, check out books. I'm always reading books or listening to interviews of different investors. There's a guy in South Carolina that I just connected with a couple of months ago. He's actually my frat brother, and he's 20, I think he's like 29, I want to say, but he has 17 properties in 2 years, so it's definitely possible. Just, start doing the network and asking the questions, really. The first thing, is to figure out the market that you want to look at, right? Once you figure out, which market you want to go into, from there, start researching, figuring out, what does the rent go for? Is this is it a college town? Is it a town where there's a lot of jobs, so you don't have to worry about, you know, people getting laid off and being able to, you know, stay in the house and everything. So study the market that you're looking at. Find a loan officer, I should say, or a bank that you could possibly work with to get a loan. You know, obviously take care of things like your debt, your, you know, tax information, all that kind of stuff that they're going to ask you to get a loan. But, you know, run the numbers, and if your property averages like anywhere from 6 to 8%, anything higher than that, that's a pretty solid deal, especially for your first deal in real estate. Drive around, see properties that are for sale. If you're looking for a property and you see a house that's abandoned, for example, you can look up the tax information to see who the owner is, and maybe it's a family who they had a relative that passed away, or, you know, they just don't want to keep up with it. It just costs too much to maintain the house and everything. Send them a letter, send them an email. You know, all that stuff is public information, so you can reach out and just say like, hey, if you guys aren't, you know, interested in keeping up with this property, I'd love to be able to put down an offer with you guys and work something out. So there's a lot of different ways, but just start with the questions to the people who are, you know, already starting in the real estate game. Probably the most important thing for anybody who's going to get started with investment real estate or any kind of entrepreneurship is figure out your why. Like, understand your why. Like, why are you doing this? You know, if it's for retiring early, if it's for wanting to pass down something to your kids, if it's wanting to have nice things, take trips, you know, ball out, you know, live your best life and everything, that's cool too. But just understand like your why, because there's going to be points where you hit roadblocks and you just say like, man, this ain't worth it. Like when that tenant, you know, destroyed the house at first, I was thinking, man, I don't know if this is for me, you know what I mean? But just always keep your why in mind, because that's what's going to be the reason that you keep going. Like you forget about all the struggles once you get like a check each month, and you don't even have to lift a finger or do anything for it. To say like, hey, I've got this extra, you know, couple of grand that's coming in every year, and all I had to do was, you know, buy back the block, literally. So
That's my bro. That's my bro.
what's up?
That's right.
Say no to drugs.